I can take care of myself. I'm not crazy, you know. Why does everyone think I'm crazy? No one thinks you're crazy, Dad. Dementia is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a common medical condition with people your age. You wouldn't have locked me up in here if you didn't think I was crazy. When is Eliza going to pick me up? It's the same conversation every time I visited Dad in the Forest Glen retirement home. At first he just started forgetting what things were named. Pepsi became bubble juice and he'd call his dog a woofer. We all thought it was hilarious until he started forgetting who we were too. He thought I looked familiar, but the helpless frustration on his face as he tried to remember how he knew me was excruciating. My childhood, all our time together, my whole life was just being erased. After his wife, my mum, Eliza, died, Dad completely fell apart. It was like she was his only reason to keep trying at all. He used to passionately assemble model planes and ships, but he smashed them all and wouldn't touch them again. He wouldn't even read or watch TV, preferring to just sit alone and stare at 51 sleepless nights. 300 The Wall. He stopped taking care of himself and became belligerent when someone tried to help him. Just bury me already. If I'm such a burden, he'd say. My wife and I would laugh it off, but we all knew he wasn't joking. He was a burden. He needed help going to the bathroom, and showering, and getting dressed, and as much as I told myself that sending him to the home was for his own good, I was relieved when he was gone. That's why I was so worried when I got a call from the retirement home 2 weeks ago. They said Dad was missing. It wasn't the first time he tried to get out, but the nurses always stopped him before he made it past the door. He could barely lift his foot high enough to put a slipper on, but this time he somehow managed to climb straight out the window. If he was lost out there, he wouldn't know how to get back. He probably wouldn't even remember who he was. That would have been bad enough, but the note he left behind made me even more anxious. I'm going to be with Eliza, and I'm not coming back. Goodbye everyone. Dad was going to kill himself tonight. I knew it. I frantically drove up and down the streets around the home, shouting his name, wondering if he'd recognize it or even respond if he did. I checked every puddle he could have drowned in, every bridge he could have jumped from, everything I could think of. My wife was visiting her relatives out of town for the week, but she stayed on the phone with me the whole time to keep me calm. It didn't work. But didn't he forget Eliza even died? She asked. He's Tobias Wade, COM 301, probably not trying to kill himself. He just wants to find her. I checked back at the house, nothing. I might as well stop by the graveyard where Eliza was buried too. It didn't make much sense if he still thought she was alive, but I was desperate. It was about 3 in the morning when I saw his shriveled form hunched over her headstone. Dad, are you okay? I approached cautiously, terrified that I was too late. He didn't stir as I drew up behind him. Did he just realize that she was dead? Had he spent the last of his strength coming here to say goodbye? He didn't turn from the grave when he finally spoke. I remember his words as clearly as the cold night air. I met her in the spring, she wakes me from my deathly slumber. Wedding bells in joyous ring, summer toil could not encumber one shared soul as ours so blessed. And through autumn's fiery air, am I to love her any less, now winter rips her branches bare? Or softly shall I sit and mourn, all the dark hours of the night until once more is spring reborn, and her eyes refill with light? Did he really believe she was coming back? Or was this his way of understanding? I sat down next to him and wrapped my coat around his frail shoulders. His eyes sparkled in the pale moonlight, but not from grief. I don't remember ever seeing him look so happy. But it's already spring, a voice said. My mother's voice. I was watching my dad and didn't notice until she was standing directly before us. Or maybe she had just appeared there, I don't know, but she wasn't old anymore. She looked how I remember her when I was a child. She embraced my father, and before my eyes, he shed his years as lightly as his tears. 51 sleepless nights 302. Dad was growing taller. My coat, which draped around his shoulders, swelled like a balloon as his muscles became firm. The bulging veins in his hands receded as he held my mother, and his skin pulled taut as the deep network of wrinkles which mapped out his life vanished. They both looked younger than I did now. Mother winked at me from over Dad's shoulder. She held a finger to her lips and said, "It'll be our little secret, okay? Let's all go home." My wife called a dozen times over the next week. I just told her everything was fine and we'd talk about it when she got back. It was better than fine though, I felt like I was living inside a dream. I woke every morning to my mom's scrambled eggs and French toast. I wanted to call in sick from work and spend every minute with them, but she insisted I still go and threatened to drive me there herself. Every night I'd return to watch Dad rebuilding his models, swearing good-naturedly when he couldn't find a piece. Then we'd all eat dinner as a family and watch a movie together, Dad making sarcastic comments throughout, and Mom giggling like a schoolgirl with a crush. I've never seen them so happy. I've never remembered being so happy. They had aged so slowly over the years and I had pulled away from them so gradually that I never really dwelt on how close we once were. It was just like being a kid again. After a disagreement at work, someone even shot back that I smelled funny. Who since the third grade has ever used an argument like that? I couldn't wait for my wife to get home. I'd kept my parents a secret from everyone, and I was so pleased with myself for Tobias Wade, Com 303 resisting the urge to tell her. Sure, they couldn't live with me forever, but just seeing the look on my wife's face when she walked in would be priceless. When I picked her up from the airport, she seemed a little withdrawn. I tried to kiss her, but she pulled away. Have you been okay alone? You've been taking care of yourself, right? I just laughed. She seemed worried about me. Maybe she was tired from traveling, maybe her relatives stressed her out, but as soon as I showed her what had happened, she would forget all about it. Welcome home, dear, my mother said when I opened the door. And isn't she darling? How was the trip? My father asked. I just watched my wife's face, unable to contain my gigantic grin. She was shocked, all right. Her mouth was just hanging open. Then she coughed and covered her nose. Well, what do you think? I asked her. I think I'm going to be sick, she said, and she was. Right there on the entry mat. The smell of her vomit was like some kind of trigger. Suddenly the whole house smelled absolutely rancid. Do you smell that, Mom? What is it? Mom, what was left of her decaying body, was propped up on the sofa. Dad, bloated from gas and covered with a yellow-green mold, was sitting in his armchair. I couldn't understand what happened. 51 sleepless nights 304 My wife ran out and called the police. They took away the bodies and took me in for a psych evaluation. The next few days were a blur, but eventually I was released with the diagnosis of hallucinations stemming from PTSD. They said my father had died the night he escaped after catching pneumonia in the night air. They said my mother had been dug up, and that the trunk of my car contained a dirty shovel. I don't believe them though. I didn't even own a shovel. I think they were just trying to cover up for something they couldn't explain. I don't get what the big deal was anyway. Even if they were gone, so what if I did want to keep them? Should I love them any less in the winter?